I was initially going to make this video a bit of a rant, and it was just going to be venting frustrations, because a few days ago I was malevolent universe. I was very frustrated at certain things, even though I was able to go back to work. There were things that bugged me, and things in my subconscious that kept, impeding on my own personal progress in living my life. In other words, frustrations that were in front of me affected me. And there were also unresolved things, which are still being resolved, that kept popping up. Feelings and dreams and, tells that you can have that you're not having the best day. Even if, by all accounts, your mood is not necessarily angry and frustrated and just, you don't have a scowl or anything. It's just the little things, right? And I even compiled a list of things that made me angry. But after a few days reflection and some time off, I've kind of been more at peace with myself a little bit in some ways. I know I haven't been very diligent with my uploads. I know I haven't really got the ball rolling on my Bible series, really. And those are things I'm working towards. And I'm going to discuss that in a future video, actually a 2-part video that's related to that topic. But initially I was like, hey, I could do a video on this, and now I think I'm going to change it to just, rather than just being things that piss me off, it's, as with all things, an example of philosophy and the real world out there, which is the title of a really awesome speech by Leonard Peikoff, which you can go and find if you search it online. It's about the practical, or rather the real world effects of what ideas have on the culture, particularly in response to this whole virus thing, particularly the response of businesses, of people who make entertainment and commercials and products and sell them. It genuinely frustrated me, because there's nothing I can do to change people's reactions or what they think or feel. And there are times where, of course, I wish I could, but I can't. And I don't think I'm consistent enough and principled enough to, to fully expunge those kinds of thoughts from my brain. When I get malevolent universe, which there might be good reasons for at times, or when I get depressed, I am the type who wishes he could just, command the earth itself and mold it, right? And then come to the realization, oh yeah, you can't do that. And, things then go back to normal. But I don't think I'm really as consistent enough to have that not happen in the same way. I can't vouch for what a consistent, principled person in dark times would think or do, in terms of, this is how that manifests in daily life. But I can't say I've gotten better at it since learning objectivism more. I've certainly lost some of the paralyzing fear that comes with it, the kind of not knowing what to do, or feeling like there's nothing to do. It's more like I get that feeling of, damn, I wish I could do this, I wish, why can't X be? And then realize, oh, well, that just can't happen. And then the next day I'm usually a little bit better. And every day after that, it gets better. But these are the examples of things that make me upset that businesses have said in response to this virus thing. Commercials, ads, and things. And these aren't things that are exclusive to the virus, but they are symptoms of the culture which are not surprising. So you've heard some of these before. Some of these are bromides. Some of these are things that will be in ads that are there to entice you to get the thing. Things like, make your house the envy of the neighbors. Now, why is that wrong? Those of you who are objectivists or have read the literature or are familiar with it will know why it's wrong. But it's wrong because it's placing the standard on other people, right? Make your house the envy of the neighbors. Be the talk of the town. There's a country song called Let's Give Them Something to Talk About. And that's the whole idea, except applied to a relationship. There are many songs like this, even songs I like, that have this idea of, let's show them. And there's a sense in which I think that's proper. There's a sense in which I think you can have that kind of attitude of the sort of defiant, snarky, or cheeky kind of tongue-in-cheek response to the type of person who might overly estimate something about you. So, for example, if you're in a relationship with someone and someone doesn't like it and they're like, well, if you got in a relationship with so-and-so, people will talk. And your response might be like, oh, let them talk. I think that's a fun, proper response. And the song I mentioned has that kind of attitude, so it's a mixed bag for me. But these commercials are frustrating because they are incentivizing you to buy something or make something or do something, not for your own happiness, but so that other people can talk about it, so that you can show it to other people. It's kind of like I think the movie National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, the idea that I think Griswold is the Griswold family. The main character, the idea that he has to have all these crazy light fixtures and things, and everything has to be a certain way. Why? So that people can see it. So it can be this grand thing for this false sense of importance in a way. That's a similar idea, and it's funny because that's a silly thing, and unfortunately, a lot of people do it. And there are probably times where I do it, but the fact that a goddamn business thinks that should be your motivation, that, picture you being in a suburb or an apartment and that, it's having other people see it that should motivate you is just ridiculous. It's the same thing with putting something in your window or a poster on your wall, right? Just to piss off the libs. I noticed this a lot in college. Because if you're on a campus, you will have windows, and some people will put things they like on their windows, whether it's a poster or a sign or a billboard or who knows what. And whether they're politically inclined or not, they will usually, I would notice people would put something like, Trump sucks, or, gun rights, yeah, or the Gadsden flag or something, to clearly indicate that this is a house or this is an apartment or a dorm with specific opinions, and that they put that there to be inflammatory. And it always struck me as kind of wrong in a way, but I wasn't ever sure why. And it's because putting something up for a cheap thrill like that of other people is a cheap thrill. It's not satisfying. It's not as satisfying as, say, putting up something that you love up there. It's not as satisfying as, renovating your house because, man, won't it look great? Yes, having other people come up and admire it is a consequence of that thing if you live near people, of course. And having people compliment it will be wonderful, but that's not the primary. And to think that it is just annoying, and that this is, a common thing in sales. The idea being that you want to sell something that the person didn't know they wanted. And, okay, sure. But then that their motivation should be someone else? It's totally ridiculous, and I hate it. But the one ad I've been listening to a lot, that comes up on the radio and even on certain TV stations, I've noticed, and YouTube ads, it goes something like, "These days, being a small business means navigating uncertainty in an ever-changing world." Now, for one, that is Heraclitus talking through and through. That's Mr. You can't step into the same river twice. Yeah, you've heard that? It's the idea that the world is just immutable. It's always changing. You can't know anything. It is, it's so transparent. It's right there, people. These days, being a small business means navigating uncertainty. First of all, of course, duh, that's what being a business is. You have to navigate things that you can and cannot control, and the uncertainty of taking a risk, right? Risk assessment, investment, supply and demand. These things aren't fixed. Of course there's going to be uncertainty to it. But the idea that that is the primary of it, and secondly, these days, where have you been? Do you think that you only live in this moment? Well, of course you do, because if the world is ever changing and always changing, there is only the one moment where things stay the same and then change again, so history doesn't matter, so things don't matter. The successes and failures of other people and what works and what doesn't and principles go out the window because you're only focused on these days, right? You hear this all the time, don't you? You hear this from people. People will say things like, people these days, things these days, oh, I wish they would go back to the old days because these days things is too hard. And I'm sick of this virus shit. I just want to go back to normal, right? The idea that people can say these kinds of things, it's kind of mystifying to me still. I get taken aback, like, anytime someone says something like that. Like, what the... How? I can understand maybe defaulting on certain things and not knowing certain things and not being totally clear on certain topics, yada yada. I get that. But, and maybe it's because I'm young. Maybe it's because I am the way I am. But the drifting of people, the default that people like Ayn Rand talk about, that Yaron Brook talks about, there are so many variations of it and so many small ways in which it happens that it's kind of hard to hold in my mind in a way. It's one thing to say, oh yes, most people, they default. Most people, they passively go through life. And I've said that. And I don't have too many concretes to back that up, which I should have more. But it's still, it's kind of, it's not that it's floating for me, but it surprises me in how many ways it can happen. When talking about art, Ayn Rand has said in the Romantic Manifesto that, when you're creating a concrete thing from an abstract idea, like, let's say, I want to write a story about an honest person, and you bring down, well, what's honesty to me? What's that look like? What kind of character does that? What's the situation? What's the story that relates to an honest person, or what makes an honest person? You eventually come to a character, right? And that character represents the abstract ideas of honesty, let's say, and all that it represents in what you're focusing on. And in that way, it's like, I get it. You can get it. You can understand that. You can understand when she shows characters defaulting on things. But there are so many infinite number of ways to create a character from a certain idea, that, and so many different ways in which you can showcase it, that also applies to real life in a way. There are an infinite number of men possible in the world, and so there are an infinite number of permutations and mixtures and types of men and women. You see what I mean? That the artist is only bound by their imagination and what they want to do, and real life has all these different examples that you can pull from, all these different ways in which things happen, which is why it's important to hold as many concretes to an idea as you can, why it's important to integrate as many as you can, to see something in reality and say, that's an example of rationalism I have not seen before. Or if you see something and you're like, I don't know what that is, but I should pluck it and store it in the back of my mind and say, okay, what is that? Is that rationalism? Is that nominalism? Yada, yada, yada. And then eventually integrate it into your knowledge. And this is the kind of thing I guess I'm doing now, is I am showcasing the effects of philosophy and the ways in which it manifests in certain ways in certain people. And it frustrates me that these are things that go on. And some of them are really simple. You know, the idea of these days being a small business, blah, 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 is not a complicated thing to untangle, necessarily. The uncertainty aspect of a business, it probably be difficult if someone is really into that idea to untangle it for them and for yourself, if you are like that. But I think the these days, the single context of right now, this moment, range of the moment, the uncertainty means that you can't plan long range, so you're stuck here. So you can only go movement by movement, moment by moment, and that's all you got. History completely invalidates that. The fact of history existing, of time, of that A is A, completely invalidates that kind of argument. It's more complicated than that, of course, to actually argue past just metaphysics. You have to kind of work your way from their conclusion and kind of, maybe walk them back and say, well, okay, you have this gap, and then, untangle things in between the truth and where they're at, and yada yada. My point is that philosophy is everywhere. It's in your advertisements. It's in the things people say. When they tell you they're sick and tired of the virus, they're sick and tired of all this stuff. Oh, people nowadays are crazy. The kids nowadays. Wow, that's the same damn thing that effing Socrates got put on trial for. Have you read Plato's The Apology? Have you read it? Because you should. The whole idea is corrupting the youth. It's been around. It's nothing new. And ideas are nothing new. Heraclitus, that guy I mentioned? Yeah. Goes back to ancient Greece, everybody. Goes back to all that. Another thing that pisses me off is the idea that, that business that provides you a service or a good is here to help you. We're like a family. We're a team. We're in this together. And there's a sense in which I don't disagree. But once again, it's not the primary. I don't work the job I do to help others or to provide the service. Providing the service is my job. But I do the job for myself. I write for myself. What people get out of it is a secondary consequence. Really, well, it's more like a fourth consequence to me. The point being that philosophy is everything in life. It's everywhere. Every little thing. This Pringle can is an example of it. Every little bit of it. The fact of its existence is philosophy in action. Well, it's the world and then philosophy. You know what I mean. The fact that someone had to make this, the name, the product itself, the things that it's made out of, what is it, Overwatch? An Overwatch ad. What's that mean? Overwatch. It's another product. It's a thing. It's a video game. Advertising. Oh my God, my words today. The colors. Everything. There is thought put into it. Or not. And that is a result of human action. Everything around you is a result of it. So, if you haven't given it thought, wake up. Smell the roses. And then ask, what's the principle behind this? What's the idea behind this? Maybe I sound like a lunatic. Maybe I sound dumb. Maybe I sound like I'm making mostly sense. Maybe these are just some isolated incidents and not broader things with implications. But next time you hear the sourpuss who seems to think that just by wishing, I wish the virus would go away, that it would make it so, as if it's just an inconvenience, as if it's just a tiny thing. If it's just, it's the flu, right? Ask yourself what that means. Not by some political implication, not just by, that means they're a Republican or a Democrat or whatever, but something deeper. What it means about them. Not to psychologize. I'm personally working on not psychologizing. But what it means for you and for a person in general. What it means as a concept, as an idea. What that kind of mentality leads to in action, in their consideration, even in the way they say it. If you know me, I'm the type of person who pays a lot of attention, maybe too much, maybe not enough, on things like body language and inflection and word usage. Really close attention at times. It's because that's important to me, and that's always revealed something about someone. When they say, I don't need any of this shit. Listen to that. Listen to the music of it. But what kind of music is it? What's in the music? If there are things all around us, and people say things, those things have meanings, generally speaking. Even if the meaning is nothing. Even if it's meaningless. It is a person, a conceptual being, who's here, who's real, who says something that means something. And even if they don't think it means something, or even if it doesn't mean what they think it means, pay attention to it. Because philosophy is not a game. It's not even, just people sitting in armchairs and pontificating. It has consequences. And they reach farther back and further forward. I should have used further. It reaches further back and further forward than any of these people will think, or care to think, or want to think. Because doing so will mean questioning so much about their lives. And they don't want to do that. Now, perhaps they've never considered it. Perhaps they have never been introduced to the right ideas. But at some point, they made a choice. And at some point, that choice has objective consequences. Look around you. Look at the riots. Consequences. Look at our president, if that title has any meaning Consequences. The American Revolution, consequences. And from what? From ideas. From things people held in their minds and put into fruition over time. If you're an architect, you build something. From what? An idea. A blueprint is a physical manifestation of an idea of something. So pay attention to it. It is life and death. The ads you hear on the radio, the reasons for people doing things, for buying things. Why do I laugh at that? Why do I think that's funny? Why do I like this TV show? Why do I love this product? Why do I like running? All those things can be connected to something else. And life is connected to death. You die but for half a second, and then you're dead. The rest of the time, you are alive. In that sense, your life is connected to death, but only as an endpoint, wherever that endpoint may be. What I mean to say is that if you are alive, you are connected to this. So you better start figuring out what can make life worth living. It's a bromide. Lots of people like to say. But why? What do they mean? And what's the meaning of it? What is the proper meaning of it? What makes life worth living? And what's the idea behind that? For striving toward life and not searching or going toward the minuscule half moment of death. Death can't be connected to life. The dead are, in that we hold dead people in our memories. But life goes and then stops. And that's the end. The final period at the end of your story. And a story has things to tell. So what next?